Halloween is just around the corner, which means downtown Salem will be flooded with thousands of tourists. But what is it that keeps bringing people back year after year? The obvious answer is the city's connection to witchcraft. Salem was a setting for one of the most famous cases of mass hysteria in history. Also, the city has embraced its notoriety and marketed into major tourism. On Halloween, Salem is the place to be. Police usually prepare for upwards of 100,000 people each year. But even with all its popularity, there are still many misconceptions about the Salem Witch Trials of 1692. Probably one of the most common misconceptions is the belief that the accused witches were burnt at the stake. Of the 20 people killed, 19 of them were hanged, and the other, Giles Corey, was crushed to death with stones. In fact, no witches were executed by burning in the English colonies of North America, as English law did not permit it. However, a hanging didn't necessarily equal a more humane death for the people of Salem. The modern-day noose is designed to break your neck, what is known as a long drop. The height and weight are used to determine how much slack is needed in the rope, so that the distance drop will be enough to ensure that the neck is broken. But back in 1692, short drop hangings were the main method used. The condemned were placed on the back of a cart, horse, or other vehicle, with the noose around the neck. The object is then moved away, leaving the person dangling from the rope. With this method, death occurred by strangulation, which typically takes between 10 and 20 minutes. Before 1850, it was the main method used. One of the biggest misconceptions has to be the belief that most of the incidents in hysteria happened in what is now modern-day Salem, Massachusetts. Despite being known as the Salem Witch Trials, the preliminary hearings of 1692 were spread out across numerous towns throughout Essex County. In fact, the witch trials are just as much a part of Danvers' history as it is Salem's. Back then, Salem was divided into two sections, Salem Town and Salem Village. The town was a small section of Salem down by the ocean, filled with people and business, much like today, while the village was a rural area with large farms and woodlots, filled with tension over land disputes. The hysteria almost exclusively took place in Salem Village, which became Danvers in 1752. Recently, Rob Zombie was in the area scouting locations for his new movie, The Lords of Salem. He describes the movie as having a prologue set in 1692, following the premise of 4 real witches who were secretly killed and vowed a one-day return to wreak havoc on Salem's descendants. If the movie is successful, more people will want to visit the area. So with more people coming each year, I want to present some locations that you won't find in downtown Salem this year. This spot right here is basically where it all started. The parsonage was built by the parish in 1681 for use by its ministers. Samuel Parris lived here with his wife Elizabeth in 1689 when he became Reverend of Salem Village. Parris was not well liked in Salem. He had a reputation of being greedy and egotistical. This was only heightened by his demand to be given personal title to the Salem Parsonage in addition to his salary. He was also quite wealthy from his inheritance of his father's sugar plantation in Barbados. When Samuel came back to Boston, he brought 2 slaves with him, Tituba and John Indian. During the winter months between 1691 and 92, Tituba would engage the girls with stories about magic and the occult. A few months later, in February, the Parris' daughter Betty and her cousin Abigail Williams began having fits that the doctor could not explain. The girls would then accuse the family slave Tituba of witchcraft. From there, Salem was swept into the hysteria that would become the Salem Witch Trials. Many of the most famous incidents of the hysteria occurred here, making this one of the most important sites in early American history. The house that stood here faced south and was made up of fieldstones. Fieldstones are rocks pulled from the ground and stacked on the edge of the fields to improve soil for cultivation. The rocks were used to build homes like the Salem Parsonage, as well as stone walls that to this day remain all across New England. The parsonage was 2 stories high with stairs that led to a porch and front entrance. 4 rooms made up the house with a fireplace in each one. The brick chimney was so big it separated the 2 rooms on the first floor. Around 1692, a salt box lean-to was attached to the rear of the house and used as a kitchen. By 1784, the parsonage was in terrible condition and had to be torn down. With the parish unable to afford a new house, the land was reverted back to a pasture. And there it sat until 1970, when a history student approached the owners of the land with a proposal to excavate the site. Numerous volunteers, with the help of an archaeologist, got together to form the Danvers dig. Today, what stands on the site are the foundations where the original parsonage was in Salem Village. The location is on 67 Center Street in Danvers, but can be hard to find. We drove by it the first time and didn't even notice it. Second time around, I noticed a pathway in between two houses separated by wooden fences. Although apart, the path is among the backyards of two homes and can be missed passing by. When on the path, look for the blue historical sign and you know you're in the right place. After visiting the spot where the accusations were first made, I started to wonder what happened to the afflicted girls after the incidents of 1692. Betty Parris, who grew up in the Salem Parsonage, went on to live a long and normal life. She married her husband Benjamin Bohr in 1710, and the two had 4 children together. She died in 1760 at her home in Concord. Her cousin Abigail wasn't as lucky. Even though she had a major role in the accusations, Abigail Williams virtually disappeared from the trials almost 3 months before the last hangings in Salem. In fact, there are no historical records explaining what happened to her during the witch trials or even after the events of 1692. There are rumors of her running away and resorting to prostitution. Reports claim she died before the end of 1697, no older than 17. However, it still remains a mystery to this day what happened to her. Ann Putnam Jr. was friends with some of the afflicted girls, and in March 1692 proclaimed to be afflicted herself. She was born in Salem Village in 1679 and was part of the powerful Putnam family of Salem. Ann claimed to be afflicted by 62 people. However, some people speculate that her parents might have put her up to it to seek revenge on those they were feuding with in the community. Most of those involved in the trials were linked to the Putnam family one way or another. After the trials in 1699, Ann Putnam's parents died within 2 weeks of each other. She was left to raise her 9 siblings at the age of 17. With her life devoted to raising her brothers and sisters, she never married and died at the age of 37. When I heard Ann Putnam was buried in a cemetery in Danvers, I decided to track it down. The Putnam Cemetery is at the bottom of the Hathorne Hill across the road, on Route 62 just west of its intersection with Route 1. The entrance is off a small asphalt path, which begins at the entrance to the Massachusetts Department of Public Works. At one time, this area was also home of John Hathorne, one of the judges of the Salem Witch Trials. I wasn't sure what to expect trying to track down an unmarked grave. The instructions were as follows. Beneath the earthen mound, located to the left, just inside the entrance to the cemetery, are the unmarked graves of Thomas Putnam, his wife Ann Putnam Sr., and their daughter, Anne. When I got there, just to my left were 3 unmarked graves, exactly as the instructions said. However, upon closer inspection, I found names inscribed on the other side of the stones. After reading the instructions a little more closely, I realized unmarked probably meant there were no graves at all, and decided to concentrate on finding the earthen mound as described. It didn't photograph well, but located to my left, just inside the entrance, is a raised portion of land that stands out, circled here in red. I can't say for sure, but this is my best guess for the final resting place of Ann Putnam Jr. and her parents. I found it interesting to find out what happened to one of the girls from Salem Village. I really only recommend the Putnam Cemetery if you're in the area or like hanging around spooky cemeteries. I'm not sure if the graveyard is open to the public. It was fenced off by a gate, however not entirely, so enter at your own risk. Before her death, Ann Putnam Jr. offered a public apology to the church in 1706. She gave special mention to Rebecca Nurse, who at 71 was one of the oldest accused. Her family had been involved in a number of land disputes with the Putnam family, adding to the theory that Ann Putnam Jr. was coerced by her parents during the trial. Rebecca Nurse was hanged as a witch on July 19, 1692. Her reputation was spotless in Salem Village. In fact, 39 of the most prominent members of the community signed a petition on her behalf. And then, at the trial on June 30th, the jury came back with a verdict of not guilty. The afflicted girls fell into a fit, and the jury was asked to reconsider their verdict by the judge. Nurse was sentenced to death on June 30th and was executed on July 19th. Her body was buried at the bottom of the Gallows Hill in a shallow grave with the other accused witches. Rebecca's family secretly returned after dark and dug up her body, then buried her in an unmarked grave somewhere on the family's property. The Rebecca Nurse Homestead is still there in Danvers. It's located on 149 Pine Street and can be visited during the afternoon in the warmer months for an admission fee. If you're looking for a site associated with the Salem Witch Trials, you can't get much better than this. There are other homes of those who were involved, like the Sarah Osborne House and Bridget Bishop's house, but they're privately owned and not open to the public. Originally, it's said that the township bishop built a mansion on this site, originally 300 acres of land back in 1636. Rebecca, her husband Francis, and some of their 8 children leased the land in 1678, turning it into a farm. A lean-to with kitchen was added around 1720 and an additional extension in 1850. The house itself has been extensively restored but still contains original beams, walls, and flooring. Restoration on the property began as early as 1908 by the Rebecca Nurse Memorial Association. Today, the house has 2 rooms on the first floor and 2 rooms on the second, much like the Salem Parsonage, with a lean-to kitchen behind the older structure. Careful detail has gone into maintaining that authentic Salem Village atmosphere. It's the perfect location for a movie. In fact, a reconstruction of the earliest Salem Village meeting house is also on the grounds and can be toured. It was built in 1984 for the movie 3 Sovereigns for Sarah. Also on the property is a path that leads into a deep field. At the end of the path is the Nurse family cemetery. Rebecca's descendants first put a granite monument over her grave in July 1885 in what is now her final resting place. Also buried in the cemetery is Rebecca's great-grandson, who in 1775 left the Nurse house to fight the battles of Lexington and Concord. And finally, in 1711, the government compensated the Nurse family for Rebecca's wrongful death. Benjamin Nurse was the last nurse to live on the property before he sold the property to Phineas Putnam in 1784. These are just a few of the locations that I found, proving that Danvers should be on your stop this Halloween if you're coming to Salem. Next time you're in the area, don't forget to visit Old Salem Village right here in Danvers, Massachusetts.